to the Season 1 finale of the Aviators South Africa podcast, Aviation Sunday, Episode 10. My name is Kabir and I'm the host on the show with Warwick. Today we'll be joined by fellow aviation enthusiasts Devashan and Thomas.
Today we are going to tell the tale of the Queen of the Skies, the Boeing 747, and the Super Jumbo, the Airbus A380. Throughout this episode we are going to be getting pilots' perspectives on the two different planes, before the two premature retirements, mainly due to COVID-19. The messages will be played throughout the episode. Enjoy the podcast.
This episode is in association with African Pilot magazine. Subscribe to Africa's finest aviation magazine today. For more information, go to www.africanpilot.co.za.
The Boeing 747 is a wide-body plane that was built in 1968 and flew for the first time in 1969. This plane was the largest passenger plane ever built to that time. There are more than 1,550 747 aircraft built to date. Right now, there are only 17 passenger 747s that are operating due to COVID-19. But many Boeing 747 freighters, including the newest version, the 747-8F, are in operation all over the world.
The first 747 variant had 27 original customers. However, presently, the 747 is on its last wings. Many airlines are retiring their 747s due to the decline in the aviation industry from COVID-19, as well as the operating costs of these huge aircraft. Warwick, could you tell me more of the details regarding the early retirement?
One of the 747 and A380's primary users is Lufthansa, a German carrier based out of Munich. They fly the 747-400, 747-8 variants, and the Airbus A380. Lufthansa have slowly been retiring their four-engine aircraft, the 747, the A380, and the A340, but we will be focusing on the 747 and A380.
Lufthansa believes that the A380 and 747's time is up. The airline has retired 5 747-400s because of the COVID-19 pandemic. The reason is because they believe even after the pandemic has ended, there will be a massive decline in the international aviation industry.
Lufthansa has also begun retiring its A380s. These are exceptionally large aircraft and are the most fuel-efficient airliners ever designed, provided all the seats are filled. Once the A380 is retired from an airline, there is no second-hand market for this aircraft because there is no freighter version available.
However, there is a talk that Lufthansa Technik is presently converting a current passenger A380 aircraft into a freighter, but this is not completely certain for the future.
Hello, my name is Hugh Patterson, and for 40 years I was employed by South African Airways. During that time, I was lucky enough to spend 12 years flying the Boeing 747, colloquially known as the Jumbo Jet, because of its obvious size, but also known as the Queen of the Skies because although huge, it was also a very pretty aircraft with beautifully balanced and attractive lines. The 747's first flight was from the Boeing factory near Seattle in 1969, and its introduction changed the world. It made for the first time relatively cheap mass intercontinental travel possible. It was then 2.5 times bigger than other airliners in service. It was also 30% more efficient, allowing ordinary people to travel the world. Its success was also determined by the huge amount of belly space under the lower passenger deck, which allowed for a lot of revenue-generating freight to be carried at the same time. The 747, 60 years of production, it has gone through continual development. The first to fly was the 747-100 series, and that developed into the 747-200 and the 747-300 with stretched upper deck. The SP, or Special Performance, was also produced. All of these 747s had an operating crew of 3, a captain, a first officer who handled the flying, and a flight engineer who handled the aircraft systems, such as the hydraulics, fuel, electrics, pressurization, and pneumatics. By the time that the 747-400 was introduced in 1989, Because of technical advances, it was possible to eliminate the flight engineer from the flight deck. The 747-400 developed into the 747-8, the last of the 747s. All these were also available as pure freighter aircraft. Because of the positioning of the cockpit, the whole nose of the aircraft is able to pivot up, opening the entire cavernous fuselage to load quickly and also to carry very long and unusually sized freight items. Altogether, 1,550 747s have been delivered so far, but the end of the production line is imminent, with just a few freight aircraft still to be delivered. As technology has developed over the last 60 years, especially in the field of engine technology, the 747 has become relatively more and more inefficient compared with other more modern jet transports, making it therefore more expensive to operate. These aerodynamic and engine improvements now allow a twin-engined aircraft to do the same job as the venerable 747. The 747, the Queen of the Skies, is a legend and always will be, and I feel very privileged to have flown her.
We're now going to talk about another primary user that uses both the 747 and Airbus A380, the flag carrier of Great Britain, British Airways.
British Airways is another airline that operates both the 747 and the A380. The airline is planning to have retired the 747 completely from the airline by 2024. This was the plan before the outbreak of COVID-19. Now they are looking to speed up the retirement. This will be incredibly sad to see because the 747, along with Concorde, is one of the most iconic symbols for British Airways.
British Airways fly the 747-400, and the airline still has 28 examples of this model in operation. This is unknown what the future holds for the A380. British Airways could be retiring the A380 sooner than we may expect, but for the present, all the A380s have been parked at an airport in France.
Sun Express 866, contact approach 19050.
That's a Boeing 5172, we are descending flight level 70 on course to Sierra Papa Lima.
Ocean 37 Yankee, descent flight level 100, after RT proceed to Sierra Papa Yankee.
Good day to you aviation interest followers. My name is Carl Jensen. I'm a retired Boeing 747 captain from South African Airways. I retired in 2003. I didn't want to, but I had reached the then compulsory retirement age of 60. The absolute highlight of my flying career was flying Boeing 747 aircraft for SAA, Air Mauritius and Air Namibia. I flew 747s as a co-pilot for 4.5 years and then another 23 years and some change as a captain. I regard my service as an absolute privilege to have been so fortunate to fly most civilian models of the Boeing 747 to so many interesting places all around the world. My co-pilot training was by SAA in 1974, and then my command training was at the Pan Am Academy in Miami, Florida, USA. The 747 was a real pilot's plane. By that I mean it had amazing performance, could fly ultra-long distances non-stop where it was most at home, or even be used for short-range flights such as Durban, Johannesburg. The handling of the aircraft was incredible. Even though it weighed a massive 400 tons fully laden, it handled beautifully and was very satisfying to fly. The Dash 400 model could carry 212,000 litres of fuel and fly with a full load of passengers, usually configured in SAA for 346 people, from New York to Johannesburg or even further, like Atlanta to Johannesburg non-stop. The very high standard required by SAA to fly the 747 was made possible by the constant training and audit that we as pilots were subjected to and was provided by SAA. Of course, in any endeavour, and as Gary Player said of golf, the more you practice, the luckier you get. Well, flying is like that too, except you cannot expect to be lucky. You have to be competent at all times. Mistakes are not an option for an airline pilot. I flew several models of the Boeing 747 initially. The first of these undisputed queens of the skies was the Boeing 747-200, later to become the 747-200 Super B with upgraded thrust engines. Then followed the Boeing 747 SP, SP for Super Performance. It was a shortened version of the 200 model, built lighter by about 60 tons. At the lighter maximum weight, it was able to climb initially to a much greater altitude, where a jet engine is much more efficient and hence had a longer range than the -200 model. One of SAA's 747 SPs was flown non-stop from the Boeing factory in Seattle on the northwest coast of the USA to Cape Town, and when it landed, it still had enough fuel to divert to Durban, 1,300 kilometers away, had the weather been too bad to land safely. When the SP was lightly loaded, say from Durban to Johannesburg, even with a full passenger load, it would perform like a rocket-powered fighter. The next variant of the Boeing 747 was the 300 SUD, stretched upper deck, with comfortable seating for 85 passengers on the upper deck. The final model which I flew was the Boeing 747-400, which could be flown with just 2 pilots, as the flight engineer's function had been replaced by certain automated system management and other enhanced flight equipment instrumentation. Most of the 747s were capable of landing in poor weather with almost zero visibility. Perhaps that'll be an interesting subject in another episode. The final Boeing 747 model was the Boeing 747-8, which came into service after I had retired. I would love to have been able to experience flying those beauties. Sadly, this model signaled the end of the line for the production of the Boeing 747.
KLM was said to be retiring their 747 fleet at the end of 2021. However, the entire fleet has been retired due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Qantas Australia has also had to change their plans. The final Boeing 747 flight occurred about a month ago. Unfortunately, it's unclear whether these beauties will fly again after COVID-19. This is a very hard decision for Qantas to make, like British Airways, because the 747 model is a very iconic aircraft for Qantas.
Virgin Atlantic has said that the airline will be retiring its fleet of 747s because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
So, what does everybody think about the retirement of these very large airliners?
I am, to be honest with you, Tom, am very disappointed. I think if you were certainly from Joburg or Cape Town, we got a lot of these big planes coming in. Definitely the A380s and 747s in Joburg, and even the 747s in Cape Town. And it's become such an iconic sight that it will really be a disappointment, for BA, for example, to change their 747 or A380 maybe to a 777 or 787 or I don't know, but it's just, it won't be the same feeling.
Yeah, it's like such an iconic plane, and it's just gone. It's quite sad.
And it's really sad. It's been around for so long, and I understand that times are changing, and from a cockpit perspective and from a passenger perspective, it's quite outdated. Some of the interiors are getting quite run down. They've been in operation for so long. But what I really like about aircraft in general, but specifically the 747s and A380s, is that these aircraft have been going all over the world, and each aircraft has their own stories to tell. From failures and pilots, and every aircraft is like a person. And so if we think about seeing this person disappear, all of a sudden, it's very sad to see. What do you think, Warwick?
I think it's also a bit of a shock the way which we expected. Only, like next year we've got Qantas. Qantas were only supposed to retire by next year, and same for many other airlines. And then British Airways were only supposed to retire by 2024. And so over the duration, we expected it to be like another 3 or 4 years of seeing these beauties flying in the sky and not getting retired as early as this.
And also, it's just a sudden retirement. I mean, I certainly think I remember for KLM, it may have been Qantas, they flew a flight and then KLM said, well, okay, well, we can't operate it anymore. And they said that happened to be the last flight. Good luck. Lucky for you, whoever was on that was the last flight. And even the airlines, I think, hadn't fully planned it out. They just were like, we're in this time of crisis. Unfortunately, it's time to go. And now, will this affect new airline orders, Devarshan?
I think it will, because as most of you know, that the 747 and the A380 cost quite a bit of money. So Boeing and Airbus will get some loss now and then.
But it's also like, why you're retiring the aircraft to get rid of it, but why would you then buy new aircraft when there's no demand, right? And so for Boeing and Airbus and the airlines, COVID-19 is going to be rather challenging for them. And I just hope we can just see plane spotting will never be the same. And I hope we will still be able to see this beauty now and again.
To the Queen of the Skies, the Boeing 747 and the Super Jumbo, the Airbus A380, we salute you. You've helped countless people go to their families in their times of crisis. You have helped transport tons of critical medical supplies and cargo during our times of crisis. It is sad to see that COVID-19 has claimed the lives of more than a person. It has claimed the lives of you, the 747 and the A380s. The skies will never be the same again. When everything seems to be going against you, remember that an aeroplane takes off against the wind, not with it. Thank you for your service. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Aviators South Africa. By the way, we also have a YouTube channel, which is an extension of our podcast. To find our YouTube channel, go to youtube.com and search for the Aviators South Africa. Thank you for supporting us. Happy flying. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Aviators South Africa. We'll see you next time on next week Sunday, 3 p.m. South African time. Please stay safe, stay home. Together we can beat the coronavirus. Hashtag Stay Home South Africa. To find out more about the coronavirus, visit sacoronavirus.co.za for more information. There is also a WhatsApp support number at 0600-123-456. That is 0600-123-456. Stay safe, South Africa.